Here recently, the rains have really been pepping up for some of us in Paraguay and the southern parts of Brazil. It's trying to break up a little bit more now, though, so some of us will get away with a dry day. The showers becoming more isolated, and for Buenos Aires, we could catch a shower here, but the temperatures are still beginning to rise.
On the next Riskan show, could Canada's tar sands prove to be a valid source of hydrocarbon fuels, or, as critics say, an expensive proposition and environmental hazard? Riskan, at this time on Al Jazeera.
The effects of the global financial crisis are being felt in homes across the world.
This is a courtesy call from National Bank regarding our
From our 4 broadcast centres, Al Jazeera takes a closer look at the important business and financial news in your region. Counting the cost at this time on Al Jazeera.
Open up to an alternative view.
You're very confused as an audience.
Experience a different life.
But if you do it properly, it's going to, it's going to hurt.
A new perspective on world cinema. The Fabulous Picture Show. After the news on Al Jazeera.
You're watching Al Jazeera live from Kuala Lumpur. I'm Taimur Nabili. These are our top stories. Within the next half hour, Akbar Hashemi Rafsanjani, one of Iran's most powerful clerics, will lead the Friday prayers at Tehran University for the first time since June's presidential election. And 2 bombs have exploded at hotels in Indonesia's capital, Jakarta, within minutes of each other. At least 9 people have been killed, nearly 50 others have been wounded. Indonesia's president has called it a terrorist act. The disaster management authorities say indications suggest that both the attacks were carried out by suicide bombers. Suspicion has quickly turned to the Al-Qaeda-linked group Jemaah Islamiyah, but Al Jazeera has spoken to one JI member who denies responsibility. Now, the 2 hotels are near Jakarta's Embassy Row in the central business district. Police say the first explosion happened at the JW Marriott, and about 15 minutes later, a second blast hit the nearby Ritz-Carlton. We'll be live in Jakarta in just a moment. First, this report from Harry Fawcett.
2 precisely targeted and timed blasts brought death and injury to Jakarta's central business district. The attackers hit shortly before 8 o'clock local time, breakfast time for the guests of the Ritz-Carlton and JW Marriott hotels. The Marriott was first hit, the damage testament to the force of the explosion. Authorities say remains found at both hotels suggest the attacks might have been the work of suicide bombers. Outside, some of the wounded were treated on site before being taken to hospital. Blast injuries included burns and broken bones. Uninjured but obviously shocked, other hotel guests and staff gathered on open ground nearby.
I heard of a bomb first, the Marriott bomb at 10 to 8, and a lot of people crying. And just 10 minutes after, a bomb in the hotel. The building moved a lot, and we start to hear alarms.
There was a sound, for me it was a piercing sound. It sounded like the earthquake that we had about a year or 2 ago that was at about 7 on the scale. And then within about 5 minutes afterwards, there was just a very, very loud noise, and I looked up and there was white smoke, and I left.
The JW Marriott has been targeted before. 12 people killed in a car bomb in 2003, carried out by the Islamist group Jemaah Islamiyah. A JI member has told Al Jazeera that the group wasn't involved in this attack, but an Australian researcher, who this week warned that the organisation could renew its anti-Western campaign, says elements within JI could be working independently.
There is a split between traditionalists who want to consolidate current efforts and to not engage in further violence, and other more hardline factions who believe that a campaign of political violence is both necessary and required.
Indonesia has just re-elected its president in peaceful democratic elections. His government will now be concerned that renewed violence doesn't undo the gains in peace and stability of recent years. Harry Fawcett, Al Jazeera.
Well, just over an hour ago, Indonesia's President Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono addressed the nation on television.
I shall take an oath in the name of the people that I love. The government and the state will take tough action against those who are responsible for the bombings, including the mastermind, and to those who will carry out future attacks in this country. We, the people of the nation, cannot give up on terrorism. We cannot let the extremists to rule this country. God Almighty will protect this country and its people. While seeking protection from God, I will stand at the forefront to confront any danger.
Let's join now our correspondent Step Vassan, who is live in Jakarta. Step, what more can you tell us now?
Well, indeed, a very emotional President Yudhoyono there on television. It seems like he feels it as nearly a personal attack on him, because only last week he was being lauded as bringing security and safety to the people of Indonesia when he was re-elected with more than 60% of the votes. And now, 1 week later, he's facing a double attack right in the heart of the business district of Jakarta, with foreigners being attacked and died here. Obviously, a very bad image for him in the international world. So he's doing his best, that's what he says, to try to find out what's actually going on. At this stage we still don't know, is it a politically motivated attack? Had it something to do with the elections, anything to do with people who have lost during the elections, or is it an attack by radicals who want to attack Westerners, foreign targets who deliberately chose these hotels? So this is still all being investigated at the moment. The anti-terror police is right here behind me, still in the hotel, trying to find clues here.
Steppy, he was obviously trying hard not to point fingers of blame at anybody, and as you say, it could be almost anyone, including increasingly the noises coming out that maybe there was a non-Indonesian hand in all of this. How likely does that seem?
Well, that's what we heard from one source within the Jemaah Islamiyah network, a person who has been in that network for quite a long time, who has actually said we are not proceeding any bombings. That particular group doesn't want to commit any more violence, but he said he seemed to him it was unlikely that any Indonesian parts of the group of the network were involved. But he also was pointing at foreigners maybe connected to the Mumbai attacks, but I think that at this stage it's pure speculation.
How are the clean-up efforts going, as you can see at the moment, Steph? Obviously there's a great deal of activity around that.
Yeah, there's lots of police, army even at the scene. We just heard that a while ago at the 18th floor of the Marriott Hotel, an unexploded bomb was found. So the bomb squad was very active and very careful here at the scene, trying to find if there was any more explosive, because it's huge. These hotels are very huge, so they have to go from one floor to the other to really search for any more explosive, and also, of course, any clues that they can find. The intelligence is around. But interestingly, just earlier we heard that from one source within the police that a very crucial division within the intelligence that actually really was looking for terrorists and looking for a bomb explosive, that section had been disbanded recently. So people were really worried within the police that there's a lack of intelligence right now.
Step Vassan live in Jakarta. Thank you. Now, thousands of worshippers are gathering in Tehran for weekly Friday prayers. Akbar Hashemi Rafsanjani, one of Iran's most powerful clerics, is set to lead the service for the first time since June's presidential election. Now, Rafsanjani has been a supporter of the defeated presidential candidate, Mir Hossein Mousavi, and a critic of the president, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. But it's not known whether he will make any reference to either of them in this speech, or indeed any reference to the ongoing opposition protests. Mr. Mousavi himself is expected to attend these prayers in his first public appearance for some weeks. For more analysis, I'm joined in our studio by Professor Mohammed Hashim Kamali, the chairman of the International Institute of Advanced Islamic Studies here in Kuala Lumpur. Thanks for being with us. One interesting thing to speculate about is why he is giving these Friday prayers, because he has been aligned with the non-Ahmadinejad crowd. Is the suggestion that he is now coming out in this very public and very formal forum an indication that maybe he's made his peace with the ruling powers?
An indication possibly, but also perhaps it's indicative of perhaps that not adequate space is provided for opposition to make their point and address gatherings and engage with the leadership, with the current leadership. Obviously, there is a division.
Well, you call him opposition. Do you think he will use this as a platform to be an opposition figure?
Well, it depends on his leadership skills and the experience that he obviously has. One would hope that he would speak the language of engagement and reconciliation and bring all sides together. It is not unexpected of a leader of his prominence. This is to engage and to consult is the Islamic way. وَأَمْرُهُمْ شُورَى بَيْنَهُمْ. Their affair is a matter of counsel between them. Islam is a religion of unity and integration, and I would hope that from him it would be expected to address this large, impressive gathering and use this occasion, the Friday sermon, for that purpose, not to divide, but to unite.
If he does do that, if he acts as a peacemaker, a lot of people will likely take that as a political comment in itself, because with Mr. Mousavi there, who is still calling it a fraudulent election, who is still calling for demonstrations and for a recount, or at least a re-election entirely, as I say, if Rafsanjani calls for reconciliation, that would be a snub to Mousavi, would it not?
Well, one hopes that the worst of the initial outburst is behind us, and that leaders are gradually recognizing the voice that comes out from the grassroots. There is obviously a groundswell for reform, democratic reform, recognition of the fundamental rights of people, participatory governance, in space even for the voice of opposition. And I think that if this is the kind of messages that we hear, then Rafsanjani would engage along those lines. If this is my understanding of a Friday sermon, there is a segment in the Friday sermon in which the person who addresses the crowd mentions the legitimate head of state and pays homage to him and prays for his success. This is customary and it is a requirement in every Friday's sermon. The message obviously is that this occasion should be used not as an expression of opposition, but to bring governance in people, promote unity and leadership. And I think that it is quite obvious if you pay homage to the leader, you cannot stand the opposite platform.
There we'll leave it. Mohammed Hashim Kamali, thank you very much indeed. Now, Mexico has quadrupled the number of police in one of its western states. This after 20 security officers were tortured and killed by drug traffickers last weekend. It was the biggest attack by a drug cartel on police, and it happened within minutes of the arrest of the cartel operations chief. Well, it's not just those involved in fighting between the drug cartels and the authorities who are being killed in Mexico. In the northern city of Juarez, more than 300 young women have been murdered in the past decade. Their bodies dumped in empty fields and wastelands with little police investigation. In this witness snapshot, filmmakers Rodrigo Vasquez and Sandra Jordan examine just why Juarez has become known as the city of lost girls.
Just across the border from Texas, Juarez is a city of 2 million people living in fear. Its prostitutes and bars cater for American tourists and has become home to the Mexican drug cartels. But the girls who are killed aren't prostitutes. Many are new arrivals, working in the maquilas, factories set up by US companies to exploit Mexico's low wages. Across Juarez, I'd noticed little shrines marking where murdered women had been found. Diana Washington Valdez is a respected American journalist who's investigated the killings for 5 years.
The Mexican federal authorities have conducted important investigations of their own already that reveal who the killers are. And some of the other people involved, named allegedly as killers, are prominent men with important political connections, considered untouchables.
She told me about an FBI document passed to the Mexican police in March. An informant had given names and locations linked to some of the murders. She showed me a copy. The FBI agent said the Mexicans had failed to act on it. Here, it seems the girls were raped and perhaps tortured. Diana's FBI sources are adamant the Mexican police haven't properly investigated these allegations. The informant claimed that corrupt policemen sometimes help dispose of bodies. Diana took me to one notorious spot where 8 girls were found.
That's where the forensic people marked them off.
This is the place where the bodies were dumped. 5 in here, 3 further over there. These crosses commemorate them. I met Patricia Garvey, an ex-trafficker who said to understand the killings, I had to understand the Juarez drug cartels. How are the cartels involved in killing the women?
Most of the businesses are built by cartel money. This is the biggest money laundering place you can ever find. They do it for sport. They have nothing else to do. I mean, they need excitement in their life, and that's how they get it.
Well, you can see that full report about what's happening in the city of lost girls coming up in Witness. That's at 1400 GMT, about 7 hours from now. Now, still to come on this programme, we'll have all the rest of today's news, including mourning in Chechnya for the murdered human rights campaigner Natalia Estemirova. And 40 years on, the world gets a new, clearer look at the original moonwalk.
For these Native Americans, salmon represent life, and the dams that block their river represent death.
It's only a matter of time before they're all gone.
We're going to have to fight hard, and we're going to have to find ways to get this river back into its natural state.
I don't think that Native Americans should enjoy any special rights or conditions.
Upstream Battle, a Witness special, at this time on Al Jazeera.
Hello again, a quick look at our top stories. Akbar Hashemi Rafsanjani, one of Iran's most influential critics, is about to lead the Friday prayers at Tehran University for the first time since June's presidential elections. And 2 bombs have exploded at hotels in Indonesia's capital, Jakarta, within minutes of each other. At least 9 people have been killed, 50 others have been wounded. The attacks hit the Marriott and the Ritz-Carlton. Now, let's cross over to Veronica Pedroza for a look at some of the other main stories today.
At least 11 people have been killed in a roadside bomb explosion in southern Afghanistan. The attack happened in Kandahar's Spin Boldak district. 5 children are among the dead. Police say the victims were traveling in a car when it hit a mine. A UN Security Council panel's added 5 North Korean officials and 5 organizations to a sanctions blacklist, increasing pressure on the North to end its nuclear program. The announcement follows a month of diplomatic haggling after the Security Council expanded sanctions against North Korea for conducting a nuclear test in May. The Supreme Court in Pakistan's acquitted opposition leader Nawaz Sharif of hijacking charges. Sharif was banned from office after being found guilty of hijacking General Pervez Musharraf's plane in 1999. At the time, Sharif was Prime Minister. The ruling clears the way for him to run for office. India and Pakistan have agreed to work together to fight terrorism, but formal peace talks are still on hold. The Indian Prime Minister met his Pakistani counterpart in the Egyptian resort of Sharm el-Sheikh. Manmohan Singh said action must be taken against those behind last year's attacks in Mumbai, which India blames on a Pakistani-based group. Colleagues of the murdered Russian activist Natalia Estemirova are blaming Chechnya's president for her death. The Kremlin-backed leader Ramzan Kadyrov denies any involvement and is calling for an investigation. The human rights campaigner was abducted in Chechnya on Wednesday and found dead several hours later in Ingushetia. Neve Barker reports.
Mourners follow the body of Natalia Estemirova, united in grief. The cortege passed through the streets of the Chechen capital Grozny, where she devoted a decade of her life defending human rights. Meanwhile, in the Russian capital, a single bell tolled in her memory. News of her death has shaken Russia's fragile human rights movements to the core. Many activists, a large number of whom had worked alongside her, took to Moscow's streets in outrage.
Something should be done, something should be changed so people don't die for telling the truth. This is scary.
It was a real shock, but I was not surprised. Who will be next?
A tribute too from Russia's president speaking in Germany.
One fact is completely clear. This murder is connected to her professional activities, and her professional activity is needed for any normal state. She did very useful things. She spoke the truth.
This was Natalia Estemirova at work in the Chechen capital Grozny. Up until last week, she had been collecting evidence on alleged atrocities carried out by Chechen forces under the authority of the Kremlin-appointed president of Chechnya, Ramzan Kadyrov. Estemirova's colleagues are under no doubt over who was behind the murder.
The authorities of the Chechen Republic, and first of all the president of the Republic, Ramzan Kadyrov, who once directly threatened her and regarded her as his enemy, are to be blamed for her murder. All our investigations have to do with what we call governmental terror in Chechnya. Let's call things by their right names. It's governmental terror when the leadership carries out illegal violence. This was her main task.
The Chechen president was swift to denounce the killers. He plans to launch his own investigation.
We'll definitely disclose this crime. Those who are guilty will be punished. They got to the Chechen Republic's territory. They kidnapped her from the center of the capital. This was committed by those who are not people.
On Wednesday, Memorial confirmed Estemirova's body had been found in neighboring Ingushetia. She'd been shot through the head twice. She had received many international awards for her work. Friends said she was aware of the dangers but committed to the job. Russia recently ended a counter-terrorism operation in Chechnya after a 10-year military presence in the republic. They handed over full authority to President Kadyrov, entrusting him with rebuilding the country. But Chechnya and its neighbors are still home to Islamist rebels committed to fighting the pro-Kremlin authorities.
Estemirova's death is the latest in a series of killings of journalists and human rights defenders in Russia. Her murder has been condemned both at home and abroad, shattering any illusion that may have existed about stability in Chechnya. Neve Barker, Al Jazeera, Moscow.
From the capital in the remote region of Papua, the Indonesian government is deploying a special police force to protect workers at a gold mine. At least 15 people have been killed on the road leading to the Freeport mine since Saturday. Investigators don't know who's behind the shootings. Separatist fighters have operated in the region for 40 years. An estimated 20,000 people work at the mine and live in the area with their families. Supporters of the former Thai Prime Minister, Thaksin Shinawatra, have clashed with police in his hometown. Hundreds of so-called red shirt protesters surrounded a police station in Chiang Mai in the early hours of Friday. They gathered in support of a local radio DJ who is thought to be one of the leaders of the movement. Police say the man carried weapons through the local airport on Thursday. China's Foreign Affairs Ministry warned Australia against interfering in the arrest of a Rio Tinto executive. Australian national Stern Hu and 3 of his Chinese colleagues were detained, accused of stealing state secrets while negotiating the price of iron ore. On Thursday, Australia's foreign minister held talks with China's deputy foreign minister in the highest level meeting yet on the matter. The US has urged the Chinese government to proceed with the case appropriately.
It seems that facts are unfolding, or new facts or allegations are unfolding by the hour. And all that we can stress to the Chinese authorities is that they adhere to due process, communicate with the families of those who are being detained, and especially communicate with the Australian government as to what the issues are.
And some news just in from the Vatican. The head of the Roman Catholic Church, Pope Benedict, has been taken to hospital for checks after a fall. That report quoting a Vatican spokesman. The Pope has been holidaying in northern Italy. US astronaut Neil Armstrong called his first step on the moon one giant leap for mankind. And now, thanks to cutting-edge technology, the world can see that historic event like never before. As the 40th anniversary approaches, US space agency NASA has released newly restored video of Armstrong and fellow astronaut Buzz Aldrin taking their momentous moonwalk. Rob Reynolds reports.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
40 years to the day after Apollo 11 blasted off on its mission to the moon, the U.S. space agency NASA released partially restored footage of the first moonwalk. The images show astronaut Neil Armstrong stepping off the lunar lander to become the first person to set foot on the moon. Armstrong and fellow astronaut Buzz Aldrin uncover a commemorative plaque that reads, "We came in peace for all mankind." They then plant an American flag on the barren lunar surface. Side-by-side comparison shows the restored video is clearer, cleaner, lighter, and shows greater detail than the broadcast images.
The goal of the team in doing that was to simply provide the best quality video of man's achievement, this historical event, that could be given.
Researchers cobbled together the images from several sources because the original high-quality recordings were erased and recorded over back in the 1970s. NASA says the tapes were reused as a cost-saving measure following budget cuts. The live broadcast from the moon on July 20th, 1969 was seen by approximately 600 million people all around the world. Many of them say it was an unforgettable moment.
We were watching TV. It was black and white then. It's one of those landmark events.
It's a wonderful thing for science to reach new heights that can benefit humanity.
And I remember watching it, but I couldn't really believe it, if you know what I mean, because it just seemed so, out of this world, which it was.
Some people continue to believe conspiracy theories, claiming the moon landing was all a hoax. Others are indifferent.
This event doesn't concern us. In general, following things that are none of our business is what has made us lag behind as Arab countries.
The U.S. and China are developing plans to return to the moon, possibly by 2020. Rob Reynolds, Al Jazeera, Washington.
And that's all from me for now. Back to Tamar.
Veronica, thank you. Now, in Tehran today, thousands of supporters of the opposition leader Mir Hossein Mousavi have gathered for Friday prayers. The service is due to begin any time now, and it will be led by Akbar Hashemi Rafsanjani, one of Iran's most powerful clerics and a supporter of Mousavi. Now, this is one significant event in what has been a series of significant events since the presidential elections took place in Iran on June the 12th. Let's just run you through a quick timeline of what's been going on since then. The day after the election, Iran's Interior Ministry declared President Ahmadinejad the winner with 63% of the vote. It said Mousavi gathered only 34%. Mousavi called the result a dangerous charade, and then angry crowds turned out calling for a recount and clashed with police. in the capital city. On June the 14th, the Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, gave his blessing to the election result. But protesters again clashed with militia from the Basij and the police. June 15th saw Mousavi himself appearing in public for the first time since the election, amid a rally of hundreds of thousands, the biggest mass rally that has been seen in Tehran since the revolution of 1979. Again, clashes followed. State media reports say 7 people were killed during that. On June the 16th, the Guardian Council announced there would be a partial recount. But then foreign journalists were banned from leaving their offices and hotels and covering what was going on the streets. On June the 20th, State TV said 450 people had been detained and a number more killed in further clashes. And on June the 22nd, security forces succeeded in stopping another mass protest outside of Parliament using tear gas and live rounds. On June the 29th, the Guardian Council certified that despite the recount, the election results would stand. And last week, protesters attempted to hold new mass rallies in Tehran and other cities, but only a few thousand people came out onto the streets to be greeted once again by heavy police presence. Mehdad Khonsari is a former Iranian diplomat and now a political analyst at the Center for Arab and Iranian Studies, and he joins us now from London. There is much being made right now about Mr. Mousavi's attendance at this Friday prayers, trying to suggest that perhaps this is another demonstration of a united opposition front. Do you think Mr. Rafsanjani is going to put up that front?
I think Mr. Rafsanjani's primary task will be to try to create an atmosphere of reconciliation between the regime, elite forces in the regime after the terrible you might say, split that has taken amongst them, which has really plunged the future of the Islamic Republic in doubt. I think
but that would be
his first and foremost task would be to try to heal that.
So that would be a direct snub to Mr. Mousavi, wouldn't it? He's still calling for a re-election.
Well, we have to wait and see what Mr. Rafsanjani actually says, but my view is that it is hardly unlikely that Mr. Rafsanjani would try to validate Mr. Mousavi's claim at this particular stage, given all that has taken place, and that the fact that he has taken this opportunity is to try to console Mr. Mousavi and urge him to not pursue his claim any further.
If he is conciliatory in this speech, as you say, that would be something of a U-turn, wouldn't it? I mean, Mr. Rafsanjani has been definitively anti-President Ahmadinejad.
Well, he has been anti-Ahmadinejad, but you have to bear in mind that he has said nothing in public since the June 12th election. Now, the fact is that everybody knows where he stands, but Mr. Ahmadinejad could have potentially taken measures for prosecuting Mr. Rafsanjani and his family for alleged corruption and things like that, as he mentioned in the course of his presidential debate with Mr. Mousavi. So I think having carved this position essentially to mediate, I think Mr. Rafsanjani would have secured some form of immunity against actions of that nature, while seeming to act as a goodwill ambassador for trying to bring this rift to an end.
Mehdad Khonsari, we'll have to leave it there. Thanks for joining us from London. That's it for the moment. We'll have another half hour of news in half an hour from now.